Thank you. So would someone like to move that? Tim Scandra, seconded Mike Davidson. I'll put that motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried. There's no public forum, no deputations by appointment, no presentation of petitions. Oh, and I forgot to say that Councillor Bucks declared an interest in item 9 relating to the Ototahi Community Housing Trust. Is that you as well, Andrew?
Yes.
Right. Then we've got the supplementary reports. I'll move that we add the supplementary reports to the agenda. Do I have a seconder? Andrew, I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried. Confirmation of minutes. There are 10 items on the agenda. Would someone like to move those minutes? Sarah, seconded James. I'll put that motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried. And now we move to the long-term loan and installation of public artwork lift on Barker's Plantation. And over to you, Phil, to present the paper.
Thanks, Leanne. At the committee, it was full agreement that, in fact, this should be supported as per the recommendations. Councillors will be aware from the report that, in fact, this artwork is like a loan from the artist to council, and Takaro are paying for the first for the maintenance for the first 12 months. It's in a beautiful spot, of course, part of the Avon River precinct. It's going to require a consent still and due process to go through because this is a heritage site. And overall, the process has been very much aligned with our policies. Artworks in public places. So, just so there's no doubt at all, it's a lovely picture. It is certainly not two pieces of the Berlin Wall joined together.
Okay, so I found this quite fascinating, actually, the history, because Phil Price, of course, is known for his kinetic work, and this was pre those days, so it was really interesting. Thank you. Pauline?
Yeah, just a question, I don't want to hold it up, but does it need to have the plinth? Because it looks like the original didn't have a plinth. And is the artist okay with
the reason for that is it will make maintenance much more straightforward and simpler by having the plinth.
Brent, would you like to comment?
Yes, it was, the staff have looked at it and worked with Otakaro on it. It is around maintenance and also sort of lifting it up and making sure that we've got good sight lines through there as well. It just lifts it up a bit out of the way.
So is the artist comfortable with that? Or yes. Really? It kind of ruins it. Anyway, that's all right.
Sarah?
Yeah, I mean, that was my question as well. I liked it a lot better in the pictures of it on the ground, and that's clearly how it was originally designed. And I'm just wondering if, while the report says that the artist was all right with it, whether the artist had a preference. I mean, one of the reasons it says is that, it stops people climbing on it, and actually, I quite like the art. I quite like the idea of people being able to sort of lean on it and those kind of things, especially because it's got that beautiful shape.
Yes, it's so the staff have had a good review of it. That's the recommendation as to how they like it installed. Yeah. But if council wishes to go back and just reconfirm with the artist, quite happy to do that.
I think, I would certainly feel better about that. I think if it was going to have a plinth, I certainly wouldn't design one like that. I think it really detracts. And I agree with what Councillor Templeton's saying. It's a tactile piece, obviously, and it looks quite nice like on the ground. But did the committee discuss the plinth at all, Phil?
No, I think overall we weren't concerned about it. But I think it's a fair question, but the committee didn't raise that question. The other point to stress is that the advantage of the plinth is to prevent vandalism of the actual artwork itself too, which I took as important.
Looks fairly resilient to me, though. It's probably
yeah, but if you look at the images, where it's been held in storage, I mean, weeds have grown through the middle, and the thing is that we could ask staff to go back and have a further look at the arrangements for the plinth, but I think that we're either approving it or we're not, and I think we should just proceed on the basis that staff will have another look at you know, what is possible in that space.
And we'll just make sure, we'll go back through Otakaro and to the artist and just
Yeah.
make sure that he's absolutely happy with this. And the important thing for maintenance also is just making sure it's not going to get hit with mowers and that sort of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, you'd hate to cause some damage to it, that is.
Yeah, can I just check though, because it does have a larger area, not just the plinth, but it's sitting in that circle of area that doesn't have grass and stuff anyway, isn't it?
Yeah, it looks...
So mowers would be well away even if it was at ground level.
It appears to be similar to that ag rock paving that they've used
Yeah,
right through the
so that's not going to have
promenade,
weeds and
so,
bits and pieces. Because at the moment it looks like a bird lifting off, but when it's got this big concrete thing under it, it doesn't look like a bird lifting off anymore.
sure.
So do we need an additional words just to get staff to check that, to say that we'd be okay with it either way? We're approving it being installed, we're okay with it if it's not on the plinth, and staff work to work with the artist.
So we'll cover all necessary consents and approvals are obtained and provided, so we'll just undertake to make sure that the artist signs off on
But if we approve it as it is here, that doesn't give you leeway to do it without the plinth.
Well, just remember it's an artist's impression of the plinth. It's not a detailed construction drawing. So I'll take that back to Otakaro and the artist.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if we were able to just have a note.
Council's view. Put a note.
Yeah, I'm fine with recommendations that we attach a note following this discussion. If council are going to make a decision to change the plinth, that's separate from what the committee recommended, and I would think we would need more information before we did that. But making a note will ensure the staff would cover it. You might even include in the note that the staff come back to council regarding it.
It may come back with a note with regards to the artist may say, well, actually lesser of a plinth or a lower plinth, but staff, I think, like you say, if we put a note, that gives an element of freedom as well.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's just
As to whether a...
So, Yanni, did you have a question?
Just really wanted to understand two things. One is there's discussion in here about the lighting being on poles and pointing down, which seems a bit bizarre. I would have thought something like this should be uplit from the bottom.
the intent of that was to not
There is no
create a whole lot more additional features and bits and pieces and use existing infrastructure to light it.
So basically it's not going to look very good at night.
No, I wouldn't agree with that.
I'm just mindful of
good at night.
the guy that's come in, is it Kevin, who's come in, several times now, and, when you look at things like the Knox Church and look what you can do with lighting, this is a pretty prominent corner site. It would be nice to think that there was some thought given to lighting, not just on an attached pole pointing down, which I don't think is actually going to, I can't see what it's going to do for this artwork at all. But so I don't know whether that can just be worked through and just considered. But the second question is the graffiti. There's not much talk about the graffiti. And obviously that'll be quite an expensive maintenance thing. So is there a coating that's going on that will reduce the graffiti or make it easier to clean off? I couldn't see from this.
There's no coating on it. It's natural as it is there. Graffiti is it's one of those things we're aware of that it happens from time to time. It's quite a public area there. If it's well lit, it's less likely to get tagged. So the maintenance staff were quite comfortable with it as it was, remembering that with the additional parks resource now, we're going to have our own staff looking after these things, so we should be able to be a lot more reactive and a lot faster.
Like we've got a number of monuments around the city where the graffiti gets on and then we can't actually remove it because it's the stone, and then we end up putting perspex around it to try and deal with it. So is this more resilient?
I think that's quite different because you're talking about natural stone there and the effect of graffiti coatings on natural stone. This is concrete block.
Right, okay.
No, I know that the committee dealt with a lot of the issues, and I'd really like us to focus on the decision that's in front of us. Aaron?
I just had one quick question over the, it changes when it's on a plinth, it changes the look, and the work's called lift. that if it does end up going on the plinth as it is in the report, we should possibly change it to lifted.
Thank you for your helpful contribution to the debate. Do
here
I
all
have a
day.
mover and a seconder for it? Moved by Phil, seconded by Glenn. I'll put that motion. All those in favour say aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried. Thank you. Then we've got item 9, audit and risk report. So these are a series of these. Could I ask you, Ref Manji, to introduce these?
Yeah, thank you. So there's just 2 reports here on the annual audit. The first one refers to the assumptions for the annual report that the Audit and Risk Committee have reviewed. On page 72 and 73, they're just listed. Some changes around accounting for financial instruments, the Otautahi Community Housing Trust loan, which we dealt with last year, so just noting that assumption of the write-down. The global settlement, again just noting that it is underway, so it's an item even though it hasn't actually been resolved yet. And some valuation updates for this year. We're revaluing our roading infrastructure, which we think will increase by about 125 million. That final report will be with us towards the end of the month, and we're also revaluing our art holdings as well. So those are basically just the assumptions that have been noted. The committee's been through them and is happy to recommend that the council receives that report.
So you'll move that, and seconded by Andrew. Any discussion? Put the motion. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. That's carried. Next one, Ref.
Yep, item 10 is the audit management letter. So Audit New Zealand have a look at our internal controls and make sure that they are appropriate. They've done that. They're happy with where things are at. There are a couple of points from previous audits which are being dealt with as well. They're in the report. So it's really just a pretty standard report. Nothing was raised that had any concerns, so I'm happy to move that report.
Move that. Seconded Andrew. Any discussion? I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. That's carried. Over to James Goff for the Chairperson's report on the Central City Development Forum.
Cheers. So you note that this is going to come regularly, just attach the dashboard, so it gives it a bit of visibility and gives any councillors an opportunity to ask any questions. I will be a little bit cheeky if you don't mind, and might just focus a bit more on the meeting yesterday, even though this is technically for the one prior, but it's more current. We had a good meeting yesterday, and you'll also note that there's a supplementary paper around the innovation precinct later on in the meeting that came from some recommendations from yesterday's development forum. Largely the Central City Action Plan is on track. You know, there's a lot of progress happening. Still, as you all know, there's a lot less leasable floor space than pre-quake numbers. Housing challenging. There is demand there, and it seems to be going reasonably well for the lower valued properties. It's the higher ones which are actually struggling. Also encouraging that people are actually buying places too without car parks, though a lot of those, the trend is that a lot of them are Airbnbs and rentals, but still there is an appetite for a lack of car parking. Well, the majority of them are, about 70% of them. But it's still an encouraging trend anyway, and giving people that option is positive. The only other thing that I just would add too, yesterday we've asked for an addition to be added to that dashboard, and it's just a case of, you know, you can't manage what you don't measure, but I think having some metrics around the dwelling numbers, residential population numbers, worker population numbers, and an interesting one that I'd be keen to see is the conversion rate of consents into titles, because, you know, there's a lot of obviously projects which get to the consent stage, but then due to a range of pressures, whether it's demand or financing, don't convert into being completed, which is something that I think we should keep oversight on. Other than that, I can take the dashboard as read, but if you've got any questions, I'm happy to answer any.
Whereabouts is the dashboard on the council website?
Pass. It's obviously on the agenda there, but it would be great if we could have it on the website.
No, it's supposed to be. Can someone help me out from... Does anyone know? Because the only reason I raise it was that yesterday's development forum had a May update, and I just wondered whether we should circulate that as well. I know that we're going to improve the quality of, well, it adds some additional information to it, but I just wondered whether,
I'm getting the page.
If there's other stuff too that people would like on that dashboard or you think that you'd find helpful, very open to it, so just let me know.
no. Okay, well, we'll just make sure, because, I mean, I think it's worth following up that one, that the dashboard is reported publicly, because I think people are interested in seeing that progress. And
Definitely.
yeah, okay. Tim?
Yeah, and apologies I couldn't make the forum yesterday, Jamie, but...
You're right.
Or James. Sorry. One thing I'd be kind of, whether it's anecdotal, if you could come back to me, not in this forum, but whenever, about the different views between we're encouraging development inside the 4 avenues, which is crucial, but we're also, with our district plan, is encouraging infill outside in that, say, green belt between, say, the 4 avs and those inner suburbs, whether it's Spraydon, Addington, Waltham, all those, and obviously some of that land is cheaper than the central city. So if you could come back with some anecdotal information, is that a hindrance, or is it how that affects the central city?
It's interesting you actually mentioned that. It's quite timely, and it's a bit of a side note, but I just had a chairs meeting yesterday for the Reading Consents Committee, and it's just around staff have just undertaken some work on whether there's any district plan type issues that that could be tweaked in directly touching on that and in that space, so I can share that stuff with you too.
I guess the really good example of that in New Zealand would be if you look at Auckland and those inner city, or not the right in it, but those ones further out. 20 years ago, or 30 years ago, or 25 years ago, they were pretty well rubbish. They were run down. Now they are the absolute key to, if you bought the property there 20 years ago, you'd be rolling in it.
The city fringe stuff.
Yeah.
That's great. So you'd like to move that, James?
Happy to move. I think Yanni's got a question.
Oh.
Have you considered having any, again based on the Regen report, any sort of creative / innovative measures in the dashboard, and equally the environmental measures as well, which Regen said were missing from the central city? So just wondered if you'd thought about any environmental measures to the central city dashboard and any creative indicators.
To be perfectly honest with you, no. I guess we could. I'm conscious that I want to keep it tight and keep it clean, because there's lots of good things that we could add to it, but I'm open to it, but I hadn't given it any thought yet. There's just so many things that we are monitoring though too, but it is something that we could look at, and I can certainly raise it with Carolyn and David as the committee advisor.
Okay. We're doing a whole thing on climate change and sustainability. It seems kind of odd that it's not more of a focus. Yeah,
the amenity was is certainly a focus of one of the reports yesterday.
Amenity, yeah.
Not everyone could make it to yesterday's meeting for some reason.
Are you meaning more perhaps potentially metrics around green buildings and that sort of stuff?
And just anything that addresses sustainability and the environmental impact of what's happening in the central city, whether it's buildings converted from existing to refurbished rather than being rebuilt, whatever.
That's a good suggestion.
But then the other one was the kind of creative indicators, the creative / innovative indicators, and I know you've got another report, but it does seem something we should be measuring as well if we can.
No, I agree with you.
Very good. So seconded by Sarah. So
Yep.
moved by James, seconded by Sarah. I'll put that motion. All those in favour say aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried. Then we move on to the hearings panel report on the Summit Road speed limit review. Mike Davidson.
Thank you. This should be pretty straightforward. The hearings panel consists of myself and the 3 ward councillors that share the Summit Road, councillors Templeton, Scandra and Turner. Currently the Summit Road has speed limits between 70 and 100 kilometres, and the proposal was to bring it down to 60 k's. This also includes a couple of the side streets just off it. There's 251 submissions, 179 in support of the proposal. There was also a number, about 23 off the top of my head, that wanted the 50k, like to actually 50k, but under some of the road rules, it's just 50 kilometres an hour is more of an urban speed setting. It has limited application, so it just can't work on the Summit Road. There's also a minor tweak in one of the amendments to Major Hornbrook Road. Just may put in the word upper at the front of it, make sure it's the right right road. As a hearings panel, we also just put a couple of other recommendations to have a look at some intersections, one of them being Dyers Pass Road and Summit Road. There's obviously a lot of recreational use around that intersection, and the visibility is not that great, so we just want that had a look at. And also the intersection of Evans Pass Road and Hebberdine. There were some submissions on that, which there's some concern for that community, so we've added that in there as well. But the hearings panel was unanimous in their recommendation that it should be reduced to 60 k's.
Okay. So, do I have a mover for that, or Mike? Seconded by Andrew. Any discussion? Phil?
Just, and I'm sure the panel discussed this, the difficulty of actually, like, 60k seems to me to be a good compromise, but it's actually, achieving that speed so that in fact motorists along there do it, and how in fact we have sufficient enforcement.
Yeah, actually they have got some speed counts, and the average speed is actually less than 60 k's. So it's just trying to set a consistent speed across that whole Summit Road. So yes, there's obviously a lot of antisocial behaviour up there where there is issues with speed. Then obviously that would need an enforcement, but the average speed of what's been measured sits below 60.
Andrew, then Tim.
Thank you very much. I would echo the comments made by Councillor Davidson, the chair of the hearings panel. There was certainly a good level of engagement through the community engagement process, a quality hearings process that I think certainly added some value. Staff advice and our recommendations are consistent with that staff advice, and also consistent with recent decision making around, for example, Dyers Pass and other adjoining areas to achieve consistency that makes logical sense to a compliant driver. There are always going to be, unfortunately, antisocial elements to the road use in some of these more remote areas. The view taken by the panel was very much that we can do whatever we like with the speed limits and signage and so on. There are some road users who will consistently not abide by the speed limits, whatever speed limit we put in place. So the approach was very much around what was the right outcome for a consistent and responsible road user, and we gave a lot of weight to consistency across the whole network in the area that we're considering. So in my view, a quality process, hearings that added value to that process, and I'm certainly happy to stand by the recommendations that were from the hearings panel, who were of one mind.
Tim?
Yeah, look, I totally support the chairman's comments and also Andrew's. I mean, the difference is make a consistent speed limit which people will follow, rather than the antisocial, which we know will not do anything that's written up or verified or supported by council or Transit New Zealand or any other organisation. I was up there in the weekend, and 500 metres past the Taki, there's a car written off up on the bank. So I mean, they were obviously not doing 60 k's, and whether you put speed signs or whatever, that's the type of driver that will not adhere to anything. So I think that when you go up there, most of the people, without question, 99% of the people are really looking out now for cyclists. Those cyclist signs we've put up are making a difference. I think it is getting safer, but that's still the real issue, I think, is the antisocial behaviour up there.
Any other comments? Mike?
Thanks. Look, I think this is just another example actually around the city where we're looking at our roads and the safety on our roads and making the right decisions to improve the level of safety. Like what's already been said, yes, there's going to be a number of people that will just disregard speed limits and do whatever they like, and we're actually seeing examples of consequences all over the place when that happens. But actually the majority of people do travel to the speed limit. And when you have a speed limit on Summit Road that's set at 100 k's, you don't want to be encouraging that type of speed. It's an environment which has a huge recreational element. There's a lot of walkers up there, a lot of runners up there, a lot of people sightseeing, a lot of people biking. It's an environment that actually we need everyone to be able to share the road. So therefore having a safer speed limit that actually suits the environment is what was required, and it's a good outcome.
Sorry, I'm just, not that I'm not taking any notice, I'm just trying to sort out the order of things. We just closed off the debate with the mover of the resolution. Sorry. I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried. Can we move to item 21, which is the response to review into management bore water security? This was the paper that we deferred from an earlier meeting, which was just an update on our response to the review into the management of bore water security, which was otherwise known as the Bruce Robertson report. I'm very pleased to see that we've got reporting happening on the items that it contains. I'm suggesting that we request staff to continue monitoring the role of quality assurance and compliance within the Three Waters unit and the wider organisation, which is one of the recommendations out of the report, and to report back to the ITI committee through the Three Waters and waste water, is it? Three Waters and waste, bi-monthly update report. And but there was another component of that I wanted noted, which was including it was to include an update on central government proposals in relation to the new drinking water safety regime. So I think it's really important that we're constantly keeping an eye on that, but have a reporting line through our committee at the same time. So to continue, so maybe instead of if you just add to well, I don't know why it's called 4 because it's really 3, but if you add to that and go request staff to report on central government proposals in relation to any new drinking water safety regime. I mean, we know that it's coming. It's just a question of what it contains, and regime, and then sort of a comma, and continue monitoring the role of quality assurance and compliance within, and then maybe instead of and to report back, just change and to, take out and to, and change it to reporting back to the ITI committee through the Three Waters and Waste bi-monthly update report. Pauline?
Yeah, thank you. That's good. Just the definition of the wider organisation, how far does that go? Does that extend out to the contractors, or is that getting too involved in the management there? Was that your interpretation? Would that be?
I think that what was proposed by Bruce Robertson was that there had to be a supporting and enhancement of the role of quality assurance and compliance within the Three Waters unit.
Yep.
What staff have recommended in the status update, that this actually requires a risk management and quality assurance approach fully integrated not only across the unit but across council. So it specifically says council, but I think that the issue's been raised about the role of city care in relation to our Three Waters, and but the organisation can report on that. I just don't think that it's appropriate that we call out a specific contractor in relation to this, even though it's our contractor.
Yeah, and I think we've pretty much been assured that the communication and the expectations are filtering down to those contractors, whoever they might be. Okay.
Yeah. Would you like to move
Yep,
that?
happy to move it.
Pauline, seconded by Mike Davidson. Any discussion? Yanni?
I did wonder, it's been some time since we've met with local MPs, and I'm just mindful of previous engagement with central government where they may not have the same understanding that we do about what work we're doing as an organisation and at a governance level. I wonder if we should actually be meeting with local MPs to talk through what our response has been, and also just to, you know, I guess advocate that we do not want forced chlorination on our water.
For sure. So could we have a new 4, which just says invite local members of parliament to discuss the new drinking water safety regime and other water matters with elected members. So to brief to brief them on our progress and to discuss the new drinking water. So that we're briefing them. Just make it and to brief them on our progress.
It's just the hot water cylinder issue.
Yeah.
Are we able to get an update? Just requested me from staff.
What?
The hot water cylinder issue.
For sure.
I've got a note to follow up that online this morning.
Yeah. Thank you. All right, I'll put the motion. Ref?
I was just going to speak to it.
Yep.
Just really, I mean, yeah, it's a good report, and all the bits of work mentioned in the appendix are good. I think what we've got to be really clear around our contracts, and we're doing a Section 17A review, is that we're very explicit with contractors, as we do in a way with parks and maintenance. Like if you see a full bin or a broken piece of furniture, report it. The contractors have to who are doing our water maintenance services have to be really onto the fact that they're in charge of the most critical asset of the city, and you just can't let stuff go. They see something that's not right, it's got to be dealt with, end of story. And I think within our contracts, when we reset those in 2020, that has to be made very critical. Thanks.
I know that it's debate, but I'm tempted to sort of ask for that to be added to the resolutions. Because I actually think it's a really important point. So maybe if we could just write in a 4, right, instead of, so insert a new 4 in between that and 5. Yeah. And just say, request staff to make explicit in all of the contractual arrangements.
Something about the importance of preventative maintenance.
Yeah, and all
That's
of the
really
contractual relationships in relationship to our.
It's our
It's
proactive
particularly the
approach.
drinking water safety regime. To the drinking water safety regime. All
What was your word into?
To highlight the importance of preventative maintenance.
Arrangements that should be all contractual arrangements relating to the drinking water safety regime, the importance of the security of the security of our drinking water supply.
I think it's actually about the preventive maintenance. So instead of being reactive, we need them to be proactive. So if they see an issue coming, then they can actually solve it before it becomes an issue. That's really, sorry to kind of
Yeah, well,
paraphrase.
I mean, that's why I mentioned the section 17A, because I presume that
Yeah.
will be part of the review in actually how we handle the maintenance of critical assets, that we may not want to have a sort of a contractual relationship, which says do this bit,
Okay.
end of story.
Take out the word of contractual
Well,
and just
well, there
leave
has
it
to be
as
an amount of
arrangements.
fluid, no pun intended, because if you have a role within your contract to do things, but when you're doing things and you see, actually, this is going to be a problem shortly, or this can be, let's sort it out now.
Yeah.
That's really what I
Yeah, but
think we're saying.
I've got it in there, request staff to make explicit in all of the arrangements relating to the drinking water safety regime, highlighting the importance of the security of our drinking water supply.
And following on from what Raf's been saying, do our contract managers within council have enough freedom to support that? Because that's part of the issue, isn't it? That we've got to get sign off, we've got to do this, or is it in the budget? But if there is an issue, or have they got the freedom, and maybe that's a change of attitude as well we need.
That's that whole quality assurance and compliance role, and it is about, and the whole recommendation is about lifting it out of the compliance model and into that more proactive rather than reactive stance. So it's not about, complying with what we're required to comply with. It's about making sure that we've got a secure drinking water supply.
Yeah, it's about contracting critical services.
Yeah.
So you can do that, but you have to have very specific contracts that have a higher level of criticality, as opposed to mowing a piece of lawn, which is not the end of the world.
No, that's right.
You'll do A,
Yanni,
B,
and then Phil, then Vicky.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, I think
Are we in debate?
Sorry, I mean, I sidetracked out of the debate just to...
Are we back in?
Just to note something. I mean, sometimes people raise something in debate that if they'd raised as a question, I might have been able to
No, that's
flick
fine.
it
I
in.
don't have, that's great. I'm just wondering, are we back
We're
in?
in debate.
Right, thank you.
Right, Yanni.
Yeah, I just wanted to just pick up on the point that Tim and Raf have made. I do think one of the issues we have as a council is actually prioritisation of our spend. And, we do need to keep this in context. Actually, our bores, although the standards the bar may have improved in terms of, or been lifted in terms of the standards that they should be, the transgressions we had on those versus our reticulated network were a lot less. So, we need to be mindful of, we've got a huge amount of infrastructure to fix post-earthquake, and we need to make sure that we're actually spending money in the areas where we're seeing the transgressions, not just the areas that we're not, which is this whole issue with our bore water security, as I see it. So, I would still love to hear from the contractors about how things were from their point of view, because I don't know hand on heart whether they weren't reporting things up to us and they weren't being done, or whether they were reporting up but we didn't have the budget and therefore we couldn't fix it, or actually if they said actually the risk is so small that it's not worth spending money on this when we've got greater priorities around our reticulated supply. But fundamentally, I think it's really good that we've got this report. It's good to get governance oversight of what is a critical thing in regards to our water. And I think, we should always be aiming to be world-class in terms of the provision of an untreated water supply that's safe to our community. And I think this, report looks at what we're doing to do that. And it's really critical that we meet with our members of parliament and explain to them very clearly the huge amount of work we've been put in to address these issues, because the last thing I want as a city is to have forced chlorination on us by people that are ignorant to the work that our staff and our organisation's been doing to try and ensure that we can have unchlorinated water for our future.
Thank you. Someone else had their Phil and Tim.
I think there's a great example of excellent work that our council have done, really, and we're a long way forward, especially around the board heads. I guess too, though, it highlights the wider issues around water safety, and and I'm glad we've got reference to to contractors, and of course that in itself is wide too, where other contractors who aren't there to do water work but doing other infrastructure work at times cut into our water pipes, and transgressions pollution can follow from that. So it's a ongoing challenge, and I guess the other part too, outside of this as well, we need to keep an eye on is the groundwater around, some of the old dump sites, how we make sure that in fact we can protect those areas as well as possible. So, but this around the boreheads particularly has been excellent work and huge effort by our staff, and thank you to them.
Tim, then Vicky.
Yeah, thank you. I think this is a real sign about going forward, and it is a critical asset. So with a critical asset, you can't be an ambulance at the bottom of the hill. So I think the preventive maintenance is essential, and to be given the contractors to be given the freedom to work with our contract managers and our in-house contract managers to be given the support and the freedom to be able to assist our contractors in reacting, because to sit back and say, oh look, we're going to have to add this to next year's budget or something, that we have to weigh up, is this a critical asset? Well, of course it is, so therefore we've got to keep on top of it, and if that's going to shift budgets around, when we as councillors have to support our staff in doing that. So I think it's been a great report. One of the things I think we do need to do is work with EQC to ensure that if in the future something happens, then that private laterals are not paid out, that they insist on fixing them, because they are a problem into our waterways, and it's about the horizontal infrastructure, getting our water from the pump stations to the household is critical, and that's where a lot of the contamination can happen. So we've got a few things to think about in the future, but I do think that's one thing that we should be supporting our staff in, and making it clear with EQC that the laterals have to be repaired, not paid out. Thanks.
Vicky.
Thank you. I think the report's excellent in relation to all of the things that it's dealt with. The difficulty that we have is that there is one issue that we don't deal with, and that's the nitrate incursion. And so it doesn't come up as a risk in all of the water stuff that we're doing. So safe, sustainable water is now one of our 2 overarching objectives. This deals really well with the whole issue around boreheads, then reticulation network, and not having to chlorinate, all those things. But the statement from ECAN that the nitrate incursion from the Waimakariri area is in the post is not helpful, and their lack of action is also incredibly unhelpful. And while it's an ECAN responsibility, the impact is on the Christchurch City Council. So somewhere in every water report, I think we need to include the risks that we face from nitrates, the fact that the drinking water standards in relation to nitrates probably need changing, and certainly lowering from 11.3, that the new research that's been done overseas indicates that we need new research here, and that ECAN's proposal to not deal with this adequately for the next 20 years actually needs to be challenged totally and full on.
Yeah, I'm just going to respond to that before I call you, Pauline, to close the debate. So, I mean, I agree that the issue that was raised for the Bruce Robertson report related specifically to losing our secure status in terms of the drinking water standards that apply, and the work that we've done in order to respond to that. And I have to say that I just want to reinforce something that I've said on several occasions. The drinking water improvement program, or drinking water supply improvement program that has been established and put in place by the council is excellent, and it is working really hard to make sure that we get all of our infrastructure into a position where we can continue to deliver drinking water that is demonstrably safe, and that will continue to have good public health outcomes for our residents. I'm writing to the Ministers for the Environment, Research, Science and Innovation, and Health and Research, in order to re-emphasise the point that Councillor Buck has made, which is that we have to get some evidence base for that correlation between nitrate levels in drinking water and colorectal cancer. It is absolutely vital that we're deeply concerned about the published Danish study that found that correlation between what are relatively low nitrate levels compared to the current maximum acceptable value, which is prescribed by the current Drinking Water Standards New Zealand. So I've raised this with ministers because I think it's so vital. I mean, we can do all that we can, but somewhere in the future, someone's going to find themselves in a position where the cost of removing the nitrate or the way that that's done makes it unsustainable for our community to have access to the pristine water supply that we have access to now. So it is a top issue, and we are addressing it. I have raised it with ministers, and I will be raising it again as well. The Christchurch West Melton Water Management Committee has written to the Ministry of Health and received an utterly unsatisfactory reply, which I will be referring to in my correspondence with the ministers as well. But I think we have to find a source of funding, which is why I'm going to focus the letter also to the minister that's able to assist with funding research, because I think that's really important. Just the last thing that that I just want to say is, and I want to repeat something that I said earlier in the week, and that is that the council fully agrees that the standard for drinking water must be demonstrably safe, and that our communities are entitled to that standard being applied. But the council also agrees with proposals to strengthen the regulatory framework to make sure that there is compliance. We do not agree that a prescriptive approach into one particular method of managing risk, namely mandatory residual disinfection, is appropriate. It has significant potential unintended consequences and can create an environment of complacency. That chlorine fixes all mentality, which we know can be detrimental in terms of properly assessing and managing risk, must be avoided. So that's the position I've put to government ministers, and that is the position that the council has. So we're going to continue to work as hard as we can to remove the chlorine, and we have to do everything within our power to make sure that it stays out. Pauline?
All right, thank you. Yes, look, I think this report is really good too, and I particularly like the table with the recommendations of Bruce Robertson and the status update table correlating to that. And the prime objective of this review, you're right, Leanne, is providing assurance of the future for Christchurch's unchlorinated water supply. And as a result of that, we dedicated a drinking water improvement program and a manager to that, and that's progressing incredibly well. But of course, we are waiting for the guidelines from central government on the new regulatory standards. But in anticipation of that, we are now focusing on our reticulation network. The bi-monthly reporting to ITI and the council is moving towards proactive monitoring and compliance, better reporting of any transgressions, and looking at continual improvement in risk management. And it now rates very high, or particularly high on the risk register, which is fantastic in audit and risk. And we're adopting an approach for risk management and quality assurance that is fully integrated across the unit and across council, as we see in the resolution there. Page 191 is very interesting too, with our list of improvements, which includes smart water network and real-time monitoring, and that's going to be a huge help with our reticulation network, and that alongside with being able to isolate zones if there are any transgressions. I think that's going to put us in very good stead if some bad news comes out from central government. At this point, I'd like to refer everyone to the draft integrated water strategy, which is now out for consultation, and particularly Objective 11, which is about safe, sustainable water supply, ensuring we can deliver without residual disinfectant. So if anyone would like to submit on that, supporting that objective, I think that we would find that very helpful, and that closes on the 14th of July. And the Mayor mentioned the letter from the West Melton Zone Committee, written on the 15th of April to Minister Clark. And one of the lines is, the committee would like to know if the Ministry of Health have a program of work focused on the research into the connection between nitrates in the water and colorectal cancer. If so, how this research will be used to determine the appropriateness of the maximum allowable value for nitrates. If not, the committee would like to see the Ministry of Health work with research institutes to prioritise studies on the relationship between nitrate levels and colorectal cancer in New Zealand. This is of national interest and is critical we understand the risks that nitrate levels pose in our communities and in New Zealand. And the basic response was dishing the Danish report because it didn't really have enough evidence, they didn't think, and stating that the Ministry does not consider it appropriate to change the maximum allowable value on the basis of this one study and in the absence of World Health Organisation advice and recommendations. So the Internal Agency for Research on Cancer has classified nitrate as Group 2A, brackets probable carcinogens, but advises the weight of evidence is that there is unlikely to be a causal association between gastric cancer and nitrates in drinking water. Thank you again for writing. And that was actually replied from Deborah Woodley, who's the Deputy Director General of Population Health and Prevention. So just a heads up that the committee is responding yet again to this response to the letter, saying that they did not answer the question. So on that note, I declare I'm very happy to support this recommendation.
Thank you. I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried. Thank you. And the timing of the global settlement decisions for council. Brendan, do you want to join us and run through these?
Thanks, Len. Just a very short paper to bring to the council in a public agenda the key dates that we're working towards for the global settlement. And working back, the decision date that we're proposing is the council meeting on the 8th of August, hearing deputations on the 6th of August and publicly releasing the paper as soon as it is completed, and we're expecting that to be on the 29th of July. So those are the dates that you'll be aware that we're working towards. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Glenn?
Thank you. Obviously, it's a very unique piece of work to be consulted on, Brendan, and notwithstanding all the time pressures on both our side and the Crown's, is there a chance we could make that time frame longer, or are there just too many dependencies over which we have not as much control as we might usually have?
What we'll be trying to do, I think the challenge is being able to meaningfully consult, which you kind of need to know what you're consulting on, and there are still significant moving parts at the moment where today we don't have a proposal to consult on. It would be too broad. So I think the challenge is being able to provide meaningful information, and the 29th is the date that I'm working towards having meaningful information that will be a specific proposal. In the week beforehand, if we've got information at that stage that we're confident out, we'll try and bring that date forward as soon as we can. But I've tried to be realistic there, that there is still a number of moving parts that we need to land.
Yeah, I don't know that it's a consultation. It's the deputation provisions that are under our standing orders, and I think it's always well, it's not always, but sometimes it's actually unhelpful to have the meeting taken up with deputations, and then only those that turn up that are aware that they can come and make deputations on the day itself are those that are able to kind of be the final influences before council debates the yes or the no of the global settlement. So it's not so much a consultation, it's just an opportunity to use the deputation provisions ahead of the meeting where council will determine whether to accept the global settlement or not. Yeah. I think that's a reasonable summary of where we're going.
And that's correct. And obviously it's there are pros and cons. What we've tried to do with the timing of the deputations is allow councillors sufficient time to hear the deputations and obviously not on the day and then make a decision straight after hearing deputations. Yeah. So you'll get a couple of good nights sleep in between hearing the deputations and then making your decision, which we think is appropriate, but it's balancing that with providing enough time for people to read the proposal on the 29th and then make their deputation on the 6th of August.
Yeah, yeah. Dion, then Aaron.
No, I think you've kind of answered what I was going to ask, because I was just wondering whether between the 29th and the 6th, given the breadth of this, was enough time for people who are interested. I think you've kind of answered
I'll be more than happy, and I'm sure others will as well, to work with groups or interested parties in that period to ensure that we're out and about and communicating as well as what we can. The proposal at that stage, obviously, the decision-making of council is a matter that you'll decide on the 8th.
Yeah, there are a number of groups, and I think Brendan's willing to put up his hand, as well as others, to go out and actually actively engage with people prior to the deputations.
And you think you can do that within that time frame between when the paper is released on the 29th and when we'll hear the submissions on the 6th? Yep. Well, not the submissions, the deputations.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
Aaron?
Yeah, it's just more for a public clarification, Brendan, that because I've been asked a couple of times by members of the public around the global settlement and its timing and the Capital Acceleration Fund. And the question they ask is, when will that money be in the bank for the council, and is there a chance that the waters might get muddied between the two?
I don't think there's a chance that the waters will get muddied between the two. The council, as you'll be familiar with, in September last year made the stage 1 investment proposal decisions related to the $300 million Canterbury Regeneration Acceleration Facility, the CRAFT funding. We're now in the kind of final couple of months of the detailed investment cases for that, and so each of those 3 investment cases for the 220 million earmarked for the Canterbury multi-use arena, 40 million earmarked for roading and transport improvements, and 40 million earmarked for Otaka Raven River corridor projects. Each of those investment cases will come to council in the month or 2 after making the global settlement decision.
So any possible dates of when that money's likely to be in the council's bank accounts?
I think the date that it's in our bank account will depend on the date that we would propose to start spending it, and that the money would transfer. We're not going to spend $300 million on day one, so I wouldn't have thought that we'd get $300 million on day one. We'll spend it over a period of time, and we'll just need to figure out the details of when that money will come over, based on our spend profile, which will fall out of the investment cases.
Yeah. Yanni?
So given that we've just heard all this news from NZTA about a number of projects, including some of the Central City projects not being funded, and given that we have had no public consultation on the Acceleration Fund, how can we incorporate people's views if they feel quite strongly around some of the priorities we should have with central government?
Sure, so that was something that the council asked a number of questions about, and I know deliberated about greatly in September. In remember September, you had recently come out of the LTP process at that point in time, and there was a very strong feedback through the LTP process, and it was reaffirmed in the feedback that the council receives through the citizen surveys, that improving the quality of roads and footpaths was one of the key actions that the public wanted the council to do. So at a kind of meta level, I don't think that there's much disagreement that the public want to improve the state of the roads and footpaths. What we have always had is a long list of works, and an additional $40 million will allow us to go further down that list than what X minus $40 million allows you to do. So it allows you to continue down the list. It also allows you to spend some money in areas such as the second coat seals and resurfacing that are very tangible to people. So I don't think it's a matter of reconsulting on new streets or new particular footpaths. The council has a long list and a backlog from the earthquake period of footpaths and roads that it's seeking to repair, and $40 million allows it to make a dent in that piece of work.
but just in terms of the current situation where a number of central city accessible projects are not likely to receive central government funding through NZTA anymore, and a number of PT projects that you could argue were actually earthquake recovery or may have been possibly included in the original cost share, they are now being losing funding from NZTA. So just in terms of the public consultation, I'm just trying to understand if there's an ability for the public to send, I guess, feedback around the infrastructure and the PT, priorities that we should negotiate with central government.
Oh, well, I think we've now just come out of another annual plan process where we receive a lot of feedback through the annual plan process on improving streets and improving footpaths and improving public transport, and I'm sure Council Laws will take that into your consideration in making the decision on the investment case. I would just point out that we're still in discussions with NZTA on the level of contribution that they will make to the transport projects. So that hasn't been settled. We are still negotiating with NZTA over that. We believe that they're important projects, and we also believe that both the TFAR and the FAR funding was appropriate given the nature of those projects.
Right, okay, thanks.
Any other questions? Jimmy?
I'm still a little bit confused, particularly on deputation heard on the 6th of August. Usually, the residents or group make the deputation on the formal council meeting. That's a Thursday. But the 6th of August, there's a council workshop. So I'm not sure we heard you mean that we organize extraordinary meeting to hear from the public or not, and also on Thursday, formal council meeting, no more deputation. Am I right? What
we'll probably do is actually start the council meeting that would have otherwise started on Thursday on Tuesday the 6th of August. So it will be a public council meeting on the 6th of August. And at that meeting, you'll be able to hear deputations. Then after the deputations are heard, adjourn the meeting until Thursday the 8th. And then on Thursday the 8th, you'll have this paper along with other papers, and that will then be a regular council meeting. So if people wish to make deputations on this paper, they'll need to make them on the 6th of August.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'll move the motion. Seconded Andrew. Any debate? Glenn, Andrew. Dion.
Thank you. Good to have this report. Thank you, Brendan. A few of us were there when the Prime Minister campaigned and said this will be for the people of Christchurch to decide. So I'm very, very mindful that today we're talking about one day, 8 days after the release of what we hope will be the full information for people to then prepare a deputation to the council. Obviously a large amount of money, 300 million, and a lot of money and a lot of interests at stake. So I just really want to underline the fact that we need to make this process as open and as potentially long as possible in terms of the lead-in time. When you think about one of those projects, the residential red zone, it's quite a short time in relation to the significance of what happened and the effect on the surrounding physical and social landscape. But I look forward to this. It's good we're having this today. By way of a heads up, people can prepare somewhat. But just to underline, it's not a normal consultation process, as the Mayor has said, it's by way of deputation. But we still need to ensure people have as much time as they can to have their say.
Andrew.
Thank you very much. I certainly welcome this paper coming today because it does exactly what it sets out to do. It gives advance notice of when the proposal is likely to be released and brought before council, and it also gives people a heads up of the method and timing of engagement if people are wanting to engage with this. And I think it's worth noting that this is a complex and difficult and wide-ranging process that we're going through, and it's certainly better to take the time to get this right date than to have, for example, rushed to get a decision by the end of June, when some of the discussions maybe weren't as complete as we would need them to be at that point. So whilst the decision may be a little bit later than we would have originally expected, I think it's good that we're using the opportunity today to give a heads up as to what the timing will be so that people can prepare to engage with the information once it's released and with us over the decision. We'd certainly always made clear that the expectation would be that this council would make a decision on the global settlement matter. We're still within timeframes where that can occur. I think what we've done is successfully found the balance between taking the time that we need to do to get to the best outcome we possibly can, giving a heads up that there is an opportunity for public feedback and public engagement by way of that deputation process on the 6th of August, and still arrived at a point where we can make a confident decision well within this term of council. And I'd also take the opportunity to thank people that have been involved in what I know has been a huge amount of work, not only getting us to the point that we're at and will be at by the time the papers are released, but also keeping the pressure on to make sure that we keep to the sort of timelines that are in this paper today.
Sorry, Dion and Yanni.
Yeah, I certainly welcome having this advance notice as well coming in for a decision that we need to make. One of the things that we were talking about right early on in this term was about local leadership, and this is where we're sort of transitioning from that Crown Council partnership more to a local leadership of the assets and the rebuilt city. And there's a lot of things in this that people should get their heads around when they see the information, so that they can actually come and bring us what their priorities are for the city moving forward. I would encourage people to find the cost share agreement and actually look at what was agreed to in those early days, and look at what we've got now, and kind of see where we can go with that and what people's priorities are when they come and make those deputations to us, because this is a big decision. There is a lot of money and a lot of assets tied up with this, and the decision that we make is going to bind the city for a long time into the future about how we move forward, especially in the residential red zone. There's a lot of stuff in the central city, those big assets, and this is really putting, hopefully when we make the decision, putting the stake in the ground, saying actually, Crown, we're working with you, but we're leading the city moving into the future. So I do welcome this. I do have given the size of this, I would have liked to have seen more time for people in the communities who have interest to be able to take the information and really drill down on that. But it's good to know that the staff are willing to go out and talk to those communities and hold those those workshops with them. So a lot of work in that week, but I'd really like to hear what the communities do say, and I really encourage all of those people interested to come and tell us.
Yanni?
Yeah, thank you. I agree. I just think the time is too limited for people. And, we've often heard from groups who want to make submissions, they get challenged and say, oh, well, do you have a mandate from your committee? Well, they need actually 4 to 5 weeks to actually do that. So it makes it really hard for groups to actually give feedback, to check with their membership and sign off on things like submissions or deputations. Fundamentally, I think we need to think of this as not just a global sentiment in terms of financial issues, but actually the point that many other people have made is there's a number of other things that government are doing, areas where they're spending money, that we as a city should try and get some agreement, whether it's things like our social housing not being eligible for income-related rents. It just seems crazy that we don't put in a number of external relationships to existing government budgets or processes as part of this, given the situation that we find ourselves in. I think
we're
for those of us,
the timetable, Yanni.
For those of us who were here when the original cost share was agreed, the report that came to council was very different to the signed agreement, and that's totally responsibility of the council for allowing it to be delegated away. So I blame no one except those who agreed not to have it come back and see it final. But the biggest issue, the two big issues were the convention centre and the infrastructure cap. Government wanted us to have an infrastructure cap. We rejected that, and ultimately, sadly, that was implemented in other ways as well, and without any transparency. So as we've gone on, We've seen a huge damage to our infrastructure, which we expected as a council, that wasn't quantified at the time of the original cost share. We're now picking up the huge cost associated to that. And I think it's really important that we explain clearly to the public why the infrastructure damage is not fully funded from central government and what we're doing to address it. But I welcome the opportunity for the public to have a say. It's a shame that they haven't had a chance to have a say in the 300 million. I think people will take the opportunity through this process to comment on that, even though I know in the report it says that it's separate. I don't see how you can separate that out.
Thank you. I'll wind up the debate. Look, I agree with Yanni in terms of a couple of matters in relation to the cost sharing agreement. That decision was made by council behind closed doors. But what was worse was that the actual cost sharing agreement wasn't publicly released, and even then in a redacted form, till December 2013. So 6 months after it was signed, it was publicly released. And that made it very difficult for people to know what it actually said. And even then, there were elements of it that weren't crystal clear, because I remember David East and I going through the civil defence and emergency management provisions to find out that actually we'd not been promised the full recovery on our on all of our damaged infrastructure. It was only that required to restore our networks, and that's how that happened. I don't know whether disclosure at the time would have highlighted that, because nobody pointed it out. We had to go searching for the answer as to why we were in that position several months after the document was signed. I've said from the get-go that we would make this decision in public, and we are holding to that, and this report states that very clearly. And I believe that people have got the right to hear us debate the issues. I don't think that those issues should be debated behind closed doors, and I think they should be allowed to read the material upon which we are going to make a decision. And I think that to me is the whole basis for us having this report today. We have real shortcomings in our standing orders process, which allows the few and favoured to be aware that they can use the deputation process on the day of a matter appearing on a council agenda. How many people sort of generally know that out in the wider community? Not many. By actually arranging the meeting to have the deputations component heard on the 6th of August, and then for the council to consider it separately, one, it draws attention to the fact that those organisations that have expressed strong interests in the total global settlement package will have an opportunity to come and express their views. And I think that's a good thing. I think it's healthy to allow people to contribute by way of feedback, because that's what we're inviting. It is not a consultation process. It is an opportunity to provide feedback. And yeah, we get to sleep on it for 2 nights before we come back and debate the global settlement. I think people do want to see an end to this issue, and for us to draw a line in the sand and essentially, and I was going to say move on, but I hate that expression so much after everything that we've been through that I'll have to find an alternative to it. So, but anyway, we've got the resolution moved and seconded. I know I just said it. I'll move on to putting the resolution. So all those in favour say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried. Thank you. Thanks, Brendan. And the last item on this agenda is the recipients of councillor director fees for 2018-19, and we have a slightly different set of recommendations than that contained in the printed copy, and that is the approval of the Imagination Station as the recipient of $40,000 of donations, and so Imagination Station, the Innovation and Sustainability Fund, and the Mayor's Welfare Fund. So they're the 3 recipients of the the proposal.
We're the directors on CNZ with number 6.
Well, no.
I'm just asking the question. I don't.
No, because that you'd have to have all the directors of CCHLs and Transways step aside as well. I don't think determining where the donations go is an issue.
Yeah, didn't mean to start
We're not being
debate,
paid
just
as
asking a question.
directors.
If you were on a recipient group.
If you were on a recipient group, so if you were on the board of Imagination Station, you couldn't.
I haven't got the imagination.
And true.
Shot!
And technically, I suppose the Mayor's Welfare Fund.
I guess, although there's no financial interest clearly.
No.
And also innovation and sustainability as well.
Well, after that comment, Vicky.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So no, I think everyone can participate in this.
Oh, jolly good.
So
I won't comment again.
So would someone like to move it, James?
Just
And
so that
seconded by
is, I'm
Sarah.
just wanting to clarify if my wee amendment is happy, is got good favour. That's just part of the substantive.
Yes.
So I'm happy to. Fine.
Yep.
Easy.
Yep. So it's been moved and seconded.
Sorry,
Glenn?
I just had a question.
Yep.
That, of Linda. Linda and I had a conversation the other day over number 6 and how material the mechanics of those donations are to the decision today. Is that a...
I think that the donations from Christchurch, New Zealand would are in excess of the 40,000. From Transwaste, they're under 40,000. So we could just ask Christchurch, New Zealand to donate 40,000 to...
Right.
That's straight from our director's speech.
Yes, yeah, but in number 6, I have to make it myself. That's
yes.
The
Oh,
mechanics
sorry.
of
So
it.
yes, you do at this point in time, unless we could get Transwaste to do
Right.
it for you. We'd have to try and.
Yeah. Pardon? Yes, I do.
Christchurch, yeah.
I just want to clarify and declare that just due to the mechanics and discussions over the whole matter some time ago, I have to physically make the donation myself rather than Transwaste doing it. So,
Right.
Which I have been doing.
Could you ask and maybe at your next board meeting?
Look, can we
you should-
take this offline? This is
Okay.
too much detail.
Yep.
I think that, I mean, the essential issue here is that unlike previous council arrangements where individual councillors received directors' fees for sitting on companies associated with or subsidiary to the council or CCHL, instead of that, the organisations themselves pay in lieu of directors' fees, they pay a donation. So, and I mean, the councillors will be asked to approve such arrangements again, each term, so this is not it's not a requirement, it is a decision that this council took 6 years ago and took again in this term that there would be a payment made by way of a donation to these endpoints, and so that decision will have to come back to council. Yanni?
As someone who's campaigned for a long time that councillors should not get additional director fees additional to our remuneration, I strongly support this. I think this is really good. This is putting money into areas that I think is much better spent, and I just am totally supportive of doing this. I think it's the right thing to do. We are remunerated as councillors to do a job, and I think putting the directors' fees into worthy causes is a lot better than just going into our pocket. So I strongly support this.
Yep. Andrew?
Thank you. I certainly would also support the comments just made by Councillor Johansson. As a director on Christchurch NZ and on CCHL, I'm certainly very happy for the directors' fees that are paid by those organisations to be distributed the way that we're suggesting in the resolutions in front of us today. And I think it's worth pointing out that the distribution decision that we're making today is quite different than the policy decision that the Mayor just referred to, that the Council council took in 2013 and took again in 2016, and it's my hope that a future council would make that same decision again, so that the work that those of us that are fortunate enough to be appointed to these boards are doing, the recompense for that isn't going into people's pockets, and in fact people who are already well recompensed for the work that they do as councillors around the table, that extends into those council-owned and council-appointed organisations, and so that the directors' fees can be used for what are, as reflected in this resolution, a range of good causes, means that we're able to do more good work through those groups in communities than we would if those directors' fees were going into councillors' pockets.
David.
Thank you. Thank you. My opposition to the director's fees position is well known, and I still stand by my decisions on that matter, where I feel the role of a director and the responsibilities and liabilities is being undermined by that decision of council. So in keeping with my position on directors' fees, I will vote against this resolution in its entirety today.
Glenn?
Thank you. I think as someone who's seen what happens when some councillors have directors' fees which are kept, and those fees are then added to their remuneration and annual reports, and to see how this has played out around the council table in the past. It's really important we hold to this, and also the policy that sits behind it in terms of the dynamic of the whole council. So all councillors are paid, except for mayor deputy, that's all publicly known, paid the same basic remuneration. It's a good rate compared to earners in the city, and it's critical, I think, that this money, which was in my case never mine in the first place actually, goes to projects and priorities which we've identified. So even on the dynamic alone, but for me it's also a matter of principle. I've only ended up on that board by virtue of being a councillor, as have councillors in the past.
Can I call a point of order there, Madam Mayor?
Yep.
Sorry, Leanne, not Madam Mayor. I didn't want to interrupt anyone there, but I just do want to call a point of order that, the substantive motion has nothing to do about the decision of whether councillors get directors' fees or not.
Well, it does actually, because it
It's just where it goes. The decision's made. It's a completely separate
endorses
decision.
the allocation of donations in lieu of councillor director fees.
It does, which you...
No?
I mean,
It's just
some people are going to vote against it, and I think they should be allowed to say why. So I'm not accepting the point of order on this occasion.
All right.
Thank you. You usually have a very high success rate, so
not
just
today.
keep trying. Keep trying.
Okay.
Yeah, Dion and then Tim.
Yeah, I agree with this fundamentally, but I'm just going to reaffirm one of the comments that I made when we first did it, that my preference would be that individual councillors who are directors on different companies would be able to have the ability to donate to a place where they choose. They're earning that money, and that's rightly or wrongly. We're not just debating that. But that is my preference. I will vote for this because I believe in the fundamental of it, but I just wanted to reaffirm that my preference would have been that councillors who earn that money should be having the right to be able to choose where they donate it to.
Tim.
Thank you. As I'm a chairman of a board and on another board, I totally supported the policy which council made. I think it's absolutely important that the integrity of the process is kept, and that is the crucial thing here. I think that once you go to put the money, if you choose to follow or agree with council policy, but you choose where it goes, that could almost be, interpreted as an election fund. So I have agreed to go on a process which the council has endorsed. I will stick with that, but I do believe that there must be some form of acknowledgement of the level of professionalism of some of the councillors, or indeed all of the councillors, when they are appointed to these roles. I'm a director of an independent body, I've been a director of others, but I think there has to be some recognition, but I will be supporting this. I've supported the council policy when it was established, and I will continue to do so. Thank you.
Very good. Pauline?
Yeah, look, I support this as well, and I support the principle of councillors taking on directorship roles as part of being an elected member and as part of the remuneration that we already receive. And I know that I, for one, sit on a lot of outside external bodies related to my role as a councillor, where there are no director fees offered anyway. But I'm perfectly happy to do that as an extra role as part of my city councillor role. And I don't support councillors being able to pick and choose where their money goes, because I don't think that's transparent, and I think that can lead to certain other, I won't go into it, but it can be misinterpreted as well. So this is a good resolution today, and I'll be supporting it.
All right, I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. No, David East. No. I'm assuming that David East is the one who wants his vote recorded against. Thank you.
So everyone else has voted in favour?
Yep.
To be perfectly honest, I don't agree with the decision. I'm just happy where the money's going. So if you want to make a mountain out of it, then we could. But I'd rather it just pass.
Right.
And okay. To go to the bathroom. So.
Move onwards and upwards. Okay, so I'll now move that the resolution to exclude the public, and that Karina Finney of Christchurch NZ remain after the public have been excluded for item 25, Brent King and Steve Walsh of Marsh Limited for item number 2 of the supplementary agenda, and that the resolutions be adopted. All right, I'll move that. Do I have a seconder? Okay. Okay. All right. So, yep.
Minutes, or are we yet to hear them?
The which?
The Water Zone Committee reports?
They're just minutes.
Just minutes?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. All right, so Councillor Chen, you're seconding that?
Yeah.
So I'll put that motion, except for item 25, which I'll record a vote against from Yanni. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. That's carried.